This book is about making lean leaders, and it uses Toyota as the world-class model. Lean leadership is quite different from the typical leadership models and management styles of Western companies, whether American or European, or for that matter, of most Japanese companies. The Toyota production system became famous in Japan during the 1973 oil crisis, when Japanese sales inside the country as well as exports plummeted. Yet Toyota recovered to profitability much faster than other Japanese companies. Why? Because Toyota efforts to eliminate overproduction and inventory by a just-in-time production throughout the supply chain meant it could quickly adapt as demand for fuel-efficient Toyotas increased, particularly in the United States. This dramatic success led to a movement to teach TPS throughout Japanese industry and eventually throughout the world. The roots of Toyota's global business leadership. Toyota's story is remarkable by any measure, but it is particularly remarkable given the volatility that has shaken global manufacturing and the auto industry in particular over the last 30 years. Plus the daunting challenges of the Great Recession, the recall crisis of Toyota for sudden unintended acceleration, the East Japan earthquake, the largest flooding in Thailand since recorded weather history, and recently the chip shortage. Toyota's consistent profitability at record levels for the auto industry is unheard of at the top ranks of the global automotive industry, where cyclical profits and losses with major layoffs that are followed later by massive new hiring are the accepted norm. Over the long term, Toyota has somehow managed to continuously raise the bar on every conceivable metric: quality, cost per vehicle, profit per vehicle, vehicle sales, residual value of vehicles, innovation, new model launches, and the list goes on. The failure of the lean quick fix. Every organization has a set of processes that it uses to provide a material, product, or perhaps information or a service to its customers. And if we can make those processes consistent, that is, reduce variability, shrink lead time, we can get closer to the ideal of giving our customers exactly what they want in the amount they want when they want it. Despite all lean projects that have been implemented over the past 3 decades, I do not know of any company in any industry in the world that has attained the same level of consistent operational excellence in its field as Toyota has. Consistency and sustainability of improvements are the keys here. I've worked with many companies helping them with their lean transformation, unfortunately only to see the gains disappear, often within months. Why? Because tools and blitz events do not ingrain the leadership needed to coach and sustain continuous improvement beyond the initial burst of changes. The cases where I have seen sustainable success were led by a particular kind of leader and were only sustained when that kind of leader was there. Toyota's success is rooted in the approach that a Toyota leader takes, seeing self-development and training others as the only path for constantly and consistently improving performance day by day. Toyota leaders strive for continuous improvement in every aspect of the business, and achieving that improvement requires everyone, from top executives to the heads of small work groups on the shop floor, to work together. This type of leadership is what has allowed Toyota to overcome many significant obstacles in a dynamic and competitive industry. More than an ROI exercise. Perhaps the biggest single barrier to building a viable culture of continuous improvement that we have seen is the ROI mentality, or return on investment. The problem arises when short-term cost reduction becomes a singular focus, trumping any investment in the future that does not have an immediate and calculable short-term ROI, such as training, creating a robust, lean value stream, developing exceptional leaders, and funding long-term R&D based on a deliberate long-term strategy. All characteristics of the Toyota Way, all areas where it's difficult to predict exactly what their return on investment will be. Cost reduction is certainly important, and it's an obsession within Toyota, but simply looking at a spreadsheet and picking items that cut costs immediately as if off a menu will not lead to building a robust lean system and a culture of continuous improvement. Differing worldviews. If the worldview of your leadership involves seeing organizations like they were machines, then you are likely to view people in terms of the technical functions you expect them to perform. Within such a view, workers are viewed as mindless automatons and managers as bureaucrats who enforce the rules without exception. The specialists and the specialists only are encouraged to do the thinking, and the management and workers are expected to follow the lead and obey. For anyone who wants to learn from Toyota, viewing the company through this traditional lens is a mistake. Simply put, Toyota is not a traditional company. To understand what I mean by this, let's look at the 5 most common questions that I get when I speak about Toyota, the underlying assumptions of those questions, and how Toyota really sees things. Question 1. Lean metrics and reward systems. What does Toyota measure to ensure that people follow the right processes and get the right results? The traditional assumption is that using metrics along with reward systems based on those metrics allows you to control workers. Therefore, any company that uses the same metrics and rewards that Toyota does will get the same results. However, Toyota's view is different. The company actually avoids tying specific rewards to specific metrics, fearing people will focus narrowly on what is measured and ignore other parts of the job. Toyota is as concerned about the thinking behind the group's plans for achieving the objectives as it is about whether the results are achieved. There is also concern that metrics-based incentives drive individualistic behavior rather than a team orientation. The key insights here are paying people to do something that they already want to do, either because they enjoy it or because they want to get good at it, can actually kill intrinsic motivation. The metrics that Toyota uses should be viewed more as tools that help the workers measure themselves against a goal than as tools that help managers to control the workers. The metrics must be understood and owned by the people doing the work, and those people must be supported by a leader who can inspire them, not just to make the numbers, but to make the next step toward perfection. Incentives are mostly tied to overall plant and company performance at Toyota, with only a small portion focused on individual goals and individual performance. Question 2. Failure of auto companies to copy Toyota. Why can't other auto companies successfully copy Toyota's approach and get the same results? The traditional assumption is that Toyota's success is based on a set of replicable actions that are transferable one-to-one to other environments. On the other hand, Toyota's view is that their company is a total system or an organism with 2 modes. It either grows through daily improvement or it deteriorates. There is no middle ground. Toyota sees a fundamental disconnect between labor and management in most other auto companies. Implementing some of Toyota's methods in such a fragmented environment would have limited benefits. The key lesson here is that unless labor management relationships are built on trust and cooperation toward common goals, attempts to copy Toyota will be fruitless. Question 3. Application of lean methodology anywhere. Can you find me lean benchmarks for a company or process that looks just like mine? The traditional assumption is that lean implementation involves finding a best practice model to copy. If we can find an organization just like ours that has, quote-unquote, gone lean and is getting exceptional results, then we too can get those results if we can just go and see and copy what we see. However, Toyota's view is different. Every organization must identify and solve its own challenges based on the details of its process, local culture, people, and any other unique factors. In fact, this is as true within Toyota from one plant to another as it is between Toyota and any other company. Toyota has a set of principles that they expect all their factories to follow, but each factory must find its own way based on its own local culture and unique characteristics. The key insights here are seeing practices that work in other contexts can be useful as a way to stimulate ideas, help you create a vision for your company, but it will not produce commensurate results unless a practice solves a real problem as adapted to fit to your specific context. And developing excellence is an evolutionary process, and you need to evolve your own culture and lean systems to fit your needs and based on your starting point. Key learnings. These questions, the assumptions behind them, and the real philosophy that is active within Toyota should make it clear that Toyota founders and current leaders, quite simply, do not view their organization or anyone else's as if they are machines. Instead, Toyota founders viewed organizations as complex, dynamic, and as unpredictable as the people who operate within them. The consequence of this view follows a logical pattern. If the world is unpredictable, then the company is going to need to adapt. Always. Adaptability requires that everyone at all levels of the organization and in every department possess deep knowledge about their departmental processes and are able to sense change and respond appropriately. To do that, people need to be trained and empowered to think for themselves, all of them, all of the time. The leader's role in the Toyota system. If there is a recipe for Toyota's success, it is a deep, time-consuming, and sometimes expensive investment in developing everyone in the organization and truly believing that your employees are your most precious resource. The role of the leader in this context is to be open to the kind of self-development needed to cultivate their own leadership skills, then learn to coach and develop subordinates so that they can grow and improve, and help their subordinates by removing obstacles and setting challenges and goals so that teams at all levels of the organization can contribute to continuous improvement and attainment of its long-term breakthrough goals. Toyota has achieved the success it has by sticking with a leadership culture for nearly a century. When Toyota decides to start developing a leader, it is making a several-decade commitment, not putting the person through a 6-week training course or paying for a 2-year part-time executive MBA. The process of developing American leaders for Toyota began in 1957 with the founding of Toyota Motor Sales, which imported and sold Toyota vehicles in the United States and is still not yet complete in the company's view. No company should aim to become a clone of Toyota, as each firm has its own internal strengths and cultural idiosyncrasies. However, Toyota's path and the development of the people who got there serve as strong lessons for any company that seeks excellence. One final quote. This is from Akio Toyoda. Our goal is for every Toyota team member, from the worker on the production floor to our most senior executives, to be working to continuously improve themselves. We all need sensei, that is teachers, who will guide us to the next level of achievement. I personally still have many sensei teaching me. Leading in the Toyota Way, a lifelong journey. Comparing traditional to Toyota leadership. The traditional approach to leadership uses the sink or swim model to select or hire proven senior leaders who are expected to make the right decisions and who either get the right results through heroic actions or get out. Toyota's approach is to create a challenging yet nurturing environment that grows leaders from within who follow Toyota values to drive continuous improvement at all levels. Americans tend to think of leadership as a solo endeavor. We use the word leader to refer to people who stand out from the crowd because of their personality, charisma, and sometimes megalomania. At Toyota, the system requires every manager from the shop floor to the boardroom to take responsibility for driving the company toward perfection. Core values. The first thing to understand about Toyota's approach is that the company is absolutely committed to its core values. Therefore, leadership starts with understanding and living out those core values every day. These values are consistent everywhere that Toyota operates around the world, but the way those values are lived out is adapted to the local context. The 5 values that define the Toyota Way are the spirit of challenge, Kaizen, Genchi Genbutsu, teamwork, and respect. Consider the spirit of challenge. Every Toyota leader is expected not just to excel in his or her current role, but to rise up to the challenges to achieve a bold vision with energy and enthusiasm, and of course persistence. As the Toyota Way 2001 puts it, we accept challenges with a creative spirit and the courage to realize our own dreams without losing drive or energy. Genchi Genbutsu means go and see to deeply understand. When Toyota leaders take on a challenge, they do not jump to solutions, but rather start with a deep understanding of the current condition. Toyota expects all leaders to have a first-hand personal knowledge of any issue that is in their charge. Otherwise, finding the root cause of the problem and identifying possible solutions based on facts is impossible. Those who understand the value-added work and contribute to it are the ones who are respected and who advance. Kaizen mind. The concept of Kaizen is a mandate to constantly improve performance. At the root of Kaizen is the idea that nothing is perfect and everything can be improved. Beyond daily Kaizen, mostly done at the workgroup level, senior managers take on big projects with big goals, but still work toward those goals through many small improvements and some big ones. Every leader is taught to remember that the process is never perfect and that the company has never achieved the perfect, quote-unquote, lean solution. Teamwork. Toyota is obsessive about teamwork as the foundation for individual growth as well as team success. At the same time, Toyota invests greatly in developing individuals who achieve high levels of mastery. The view that individual success can only happen within the team and that teams benefit from the personal growth of individuals is constantly reinforced and lived up and down the chain of command. Respect. In many ways, this is the most fundamental of the core values and even ties to the root purpose of the company. Respect for people starts with a sincere desire to contribute to society through providing the best possible products and services. This extends to respect for the community, customers, employees, and all business partners up and down the value stream. The Toyota Way Leadership Development Model. Based on what we've seen and experienced at Toyota, Gary Convis and I created a multi-stage leadership model that we think accurately captures the Toyota approach to lean leadership, both what it means to be a leader at Toyota and how it goes about developing leaders. The reality is not as linear as the model would suggest, and it is most definitely cyclical, repeating over and over throughout a person's career. But there does seem to be a logical sequence from developing oneself to ultimately integrating the whole organization to align on goals. Each leader will go through the stages many times during his or her career. Consider first self-development. Leaders at Toyota must develop themselves to a certain level before they can take responsibility for developing others in the Toyota way and leading the organization to achieving challenging goals. They must develop themselves in the 5 core values and able to put that into practice on a daily basis. Toyota believes that the key trait that distinguishes potential leaders from everyone else is self-development. Leaders self-motivated and actively seeking to improve themselves and their skills every day, getting a little bit better. Developing others. The second stage of leadership development is taking on the task of developing others. It's often been said that the best way to learn something is to teach it. Toyota takes this view to heart and expects that all leaders will be actively engaged in coaching and developing not just star performers or favorites, but everyone on their staff. Supporting daily Kaizen. While the first 2 stages are primarily about individual leadership, this third stage begins to focus more on institutional leadership, keeping groups of people pointed toward and focused on what Toyota calls True North. True North is based on the values of the Toyota Way, which provide a stable vision of where the company should be headed, and it is not negotiable. The basic unit of organization in Toyota is the relatively autonomous work group. The group leader is like the president of a mini business. Team leaders are production workers who are offline and respond to and have a variety of leadership responsibilities. The small span of control allows time for coaching. Within this stage, leaders are ensuring that their teams are capable of both maintenance Kaizen, that is dealing with the daily changes, blips, and bumps of the real world to keep each process performing to its current standard, and improvement Kaizen, which is about moving each process from its current standard to a higher level of performance. Creating vision and aligning goals. The fourth stage involves aligning all the Kaizen efforts, what you might think of as the small picture, to ensure that the right big picture goals are accomplished. Without guidance and channeling of efforts, Kaizen could lead to chaos. Two interlocking processes could be pursuing Kaizen that takes them in opposite directions. At this stage of development, the leader and the organization are actively involved in what in Japanese is called Hoshin Kanri. Many companies call this strategy deployment. It is the process of setting consensual goals for long-term improvement and then cascading those goals step by step in the organization, looking at the desired outcome and what the process would need to look like to achieve that outcome. The focus starts with very long-term improvement, for example, a strategy, and that's converted to a 5-year business plan, which is converted to annual plans that cascade from president, at this time Akio Toyota, down to the small work group. Result: adapting to changes in the environment. Only after leaders at all levels have developed to a high level through self-development and coaching are they capable of adapting to the frequent and major changes that the environment will throw at them. We sometimes think of lean organizations as lean in terms of efficiency, few people, and low cost. But the ultimate lean organization is adaptable to the environment and what we might call a learning organization. Genshi Genbutsu, go and see the actual situation, means imagining that what you are observing is your own job rather than somebody else's problem, and making efforts to improve it. Job titles are unimportant. In the end, the people who know the Gemba, where the work is actually done, are the most respected. Chapter 2. Self-Development, Reliably Identifying and Coaching Developing Leaders at the Gemba. The Toyota Way Leadership Development Model. Step 1. Commit to self-development. The only way to become a Toyota leader is to learn the Toyota style of leadership by doing through a continuous, never-ending learning process. Leaders cannot be forced to develop, but must have the internal drive to self-develop. Only those who have a passion for self-development stand out under this system. Self-development also requires having mentors close at hand to both protect and guide the students and identify the best self-developers among them. For the system to work, Toyota has to balance the need to give leaders and prospective leaders the space to self-develop while staying close enough to reliably identify and coach them so that they self-develop in ways that are consistent with the Toyota Way values. Repeated learning cycles. All the intellectual understanding in the world would not automatically make one a great tennis player, a great musician, or a great cook. A set of basic skills has to be learned through repetition and what is now popularly known as deliberate practice. Deliberate practice means that you have a way to do things, you compare what you actually do to that way, and close the gap through feedback. The leadership identification process at Toyota begins with the most junior worker receiving training from a sensei, which means both master and teacher. All students are given the opportunity to take the initiative under the tutelage of a sensei. The role of the sensei is to provide challenges, structured opportunities for learning and coaching, so the student has an opportunity to learn by doing, what Toyota calls on-the-job development. It is truly collaborative learning between the teacher and the student, and there is joint responsibility. The Shu-Ha-Ri cycle of learning. Researcher and author Mike Rother finds parallels between Toyota teaching methods and the Japanese concept of kata from the martial arts. Kata literally means form and is the basis of teaching Japanese arts like karate, kabuki, or the tea ceremony, and is the way people learn to perform a highly detailed and scripted task. The core of kata is the layered learning cycle, which is called in Japanese Shu-Ha-Ri. These three terms refer to 3 stages of learning for the student and 3 levels of involvement for the teacher. Shu means to protect and to do it precisely the way the teacher shows the student. Ha means to break away from the standard method and begin to craft your own way. And Ri is the actual freedom to create your own way and to begin to focus on the art rather than the technique. In the Shu phase, the student, under the watchful eye of the master, learns the fundamentals by repeatedly performing tasks to precise standards as demonstrated by the teacher. The student is observed by the teacher, who is in a sense protecting him or her and the work product from failure. In the Ha stage, the student has more freedom to practice unsupervised, although the master checks in regularly. The student can apply the rules more creatively, but still follows the standard form quite rigidly. In the Ri stage, the rules and behaviors have become so ingrained that the student no longer thinks about them consciously. The actions are habits and come naturally. The student is in a position to develop her own understanding and to improve on what she has learned. So thinking about the martial arts, you start by practicing kata, which are specific movements like how to punch and how to evade a punch, and you do it the way the master shows you. In the Ha stage, you can now start to vary a little bit the methods you were taught, but you're still following the standards. You're still being supervised, less often but periodically by the coach. And in the Ri stage, you're actually fighting a fight and you don't have time to think, am I doing this exactly the way the teacher told me? It has to become a habit, and you focus on the fight and not the kata that you've been taught. This cycle continues throughout the individual's life or work career. It's a learning cycle because the student is going through shu-ha-ri over and over, more and more deeply, periodically returning to the basics to practice the original standard form. There are 5 aspects of the shu-ha-ri that deliver the results of mastering a complex skill. First, there is the standardized work, the form, the kata, the way of doing each individual skill. Then there are deep observations by the sensei to guide. Third, the teacher doesn't answer every question and allows the student to learn by struggling to some degree on their own. Fourth, there is the coaching through on-the-job development to get both practice and feedback. And finally, there are steadily increasing challenges to grow the student's capability. Let me talk about each of these. First, standardized work as a foundation for learning. Standardized work plays an important role in identifying self-developers and in teaching each individual micro-skill, the kata, in a specific way. Under shu-ha-ri, you are essentially following standardized work, the kata, which are demonstrated in a very specific way by the instructor, and the instructor will let you move on only after you have mastered this way and can do it repeatedly in a kind of natural habit. This then provides a baseline against which to measure improvement. In fact, some of the master karate black belts can tell you exactly how many kata they have mastered, which is the reason why they're at that high level. Second is deep observation by the sensei. Under the shu-ha-ri system, sensei are an absolute requirement. The sensei doing the training and observing the student's progress has to be a master of what he or she is teaching. A huge benefit of this process is that the masters are the teachers, and therefore the quality of training immediately goes up. In terms of self-development, though, the benefit is that those who are most able to judge the quality of an employee attempts at self-development are the ones who are giving feedback. The chances of a master recognizing opportunities to meaningfully help the self-development in others is much higher than if the task was left to a novice. Third, there are no answers from the sensei. The student must deeply reflect. Without practice, a leader can easily end up solving problems for those he or she is trying to develop, rather than allowing self-development to proceed. Perhaps the hardest thing for developing a Toyota leader is to learn how to avoid using your skills as a coach in a way that provides a short-term benefit of getting results, but is counterproductive to the longer-term goal of developing others. The concept of hansei, which is reflection in Japanese, is key to self-development at Toyota. Hansei is the conscious process of looking back at oneself, picking apart what went well and what did not go well, and vowing to be better next time. Hansei pervades operations at Toyota both at the personal level and the group level. At Toyota, hansei is expected from every leader and every project as the project proceeds and as an overall reflection at the end of the project. The approach of not providing answers, instead questioning, and allowing the learners to engage in hansei and come to conclusions for themselves is both more effective and a vital part of enabling and identifying self-development. Relatively little of the training and development of team members or leaders at Toyota happens in a classroom. On-the-job development is much better for assessing what a student has learned, whether she or he can apply her learning, and then deciding when to free the student up so that they need less intense coaching. This happens at the Gemba, where the work is done, and it happens on real projects, not on simulations in a classroom. The main assessment of leadership that matters is the behavior of the student in real-world situations where they're facing a challenge. Five, steadily increasing challenges. Self-development is expected throughout the career of a Toyota leader. The challenges steadily increase as the leader takes on more responsibility, and the leader must continually self-develop in order to rise to each challenge and deliver results within the Toyota way. We characterize these Shu-Hari learning cycles as plan, do, check, act, PDCA learning loops. When assigned a new task, the growing leader must first understand the current situation in detail and the gaps between it and the target condition. The do stage involves leading others to work as a team to achieve the challenging objectives through experimentation. The check is done with the help and feedback of the sensei and is a reflection on the results and, more important, on the process of achieving the results. And finally, in the act stage, the student leader reflects on what happened in reaching their target condition and setting the next target condition. Based on what I've learned, what should I work on next? Those who succeed at achieving challenging goals while following Toyota Way values are then selected to be moved to the next challenging assignment. Often that means a promotion. Success breeds increasingly challenging assignments and eventually moving up the ladder, but in a more gradual way than often in the West we expect to be promoted. Those who show greater mastery and demonstrate leadership will progress to a higher level than those who simply do the job as expected. The leader who is moving up is taking on a greater scope of responsibility for more people and functions, and also a longer planning horizon. Researcher and author Mike Rother developed practice routines for the Shu stage, which he calls starter kata. The skill that he is trying to develop is the mindset of scientific thinking. By scientific thinking, we mean working toward an objective, a challenging goal, where the pathway to get there is uncertain, and you need to find your way there through experiments. Experiments means you acknowledge, I don't know, I'm going to try, and then check to see what happens, and then based on that, with further action, define my next experiment on the way to the goal. The starting point for learning scientific thinking is to define what it looks like, what is the process, and then break it down into small kata, which are highly detailed and scripted tasks. The model for scientific thinking Mike Rother developed, he calls the improvement kata, and there's 4 broad steps. First, set the direction toward a big challenge, a big improvement, and he recommends generally 6 to 12 months out for the challenge. Second, understand the current condition. Where am I now? Third, define your next target condition. This is a short-term goal of where you want to be. For example, 1 week out or perhaps 2 weeks out, and then experiment to get there through rapid PDCA, through rapid learning cycles. A plan, the action, the hypothesis, try it, check what happened, and reflect on what you've learned. The experiments are where you're testing your ideas for improvement, ideally one idea at a time. For each experiment, you define the idea you will test, state what you expect to happen, run the experiment, examine the results, and reflect on what you learned. The skills for each step are practiced with the help of a coach, and the information as you progress is recorded on a storyboard. And the coach is asking questions. They're in fact scripted starter kata for coaching questions. And the coach is listening to understand your way of thinking, to give you feedback. And through repetition over time, you begin to think in this scientific way. It becomes natural. One quote from Akio Toyoda does a great job of explaining Toyoda's view of developing leaders. He said, "At Toyota, we have always invested heavily in developing leaders who understand and live the principles and values of the company. We want our DNA to be encoded in every leader and every team member at every level of the company. We expect greatness from all of our people. We expect them to accept and conquer challenges that may seem overwhelming at first glance. The greatness in people comes out only when they're led by great leaders. We are all growing and learning, and we all need teachers and coaches to help guide us. We say at Toyota that every leader is a teacher developing the next generation of leaders. This is their most important job." Chapter 3. Coach and Develop Others. In Chapter 2, we considered how Toyota leaders self-develop. In this chapter, we will look at the flip side of self-development, delving more deeply into how Toyota leaders coach associates to help them unlock their leadership potential. Leaders are responsible for creating an environment in which future leaders can blossom. This environment must simultaneously nurture and severely challenge the potential leader, which seems contradictory, but is seen as complementary within Toyota. In manufacturing, a big part of these challenges are naturally generated by the Toyota Production System, TPS. TPS creates challenges to force employees' development. The Toyota Production System itself is largely designed to create continual challenges for leaders and team members. TPS was displayed as a house to illustrate that it is a system and operates fully only if all the elements work together. Ono used to say that the Toyota Production System is designed to make problems visible, to challenge people so that they grow and become better problem solvers and better people. TPS, as you reduce inventory, more rapidly exposes problems, and creates a never-ending stream of opportunities for on-the-job development and increased challenges. Toyota Sensei do not need to create artificial training situations in which something goes wrong or there is a specific fix that trainees are supposed to find. TPS not only drives the company toward perfection, but also creates the opportunities for leadership development, both self-development and developing others, that are necessary to fill the leadership pipeline. A3 problem solving makes the thinking process visible. For managers, Toyota uses a standard approach to problem solving that is known as Toyota Business Practices. The single-page report details the problem. The leader defines the gap between the current and ideal states, breaks down this huge gap into a smaller subproblem, sets a target for the subproblem, works to identify the root cause of the problem, identifies possible countermeasures, tests the countermeasures, checks the results, and defines further actions required. The goal of filling out this A3-sized report, of course, is not to fill out the form perfectly or to have the perfect problem-solving process, but rather it makes the leader's thinking process visible so that he or she can be coached. The coach is able to see a succinct summary of major points, ask challenging questions, and this way push the leader to think some more in a deeper way, sometimes, for example, going back to the Gemba to investigate some more. The coach will not accept the first writing of the report as done and will continually pepper the leader with questions and challenges and try to get the leader to think more deeply. Without the coaching, the A3 is simply a report, a lifeless document. TBP is an 8-step process based on the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle of quality guru J. Edwards Deming. Let me summarize again the 8 steps of TBP. Number 1, define the problem relative to the ideal state defined by the leader. What should be happening? This is the first step of the plan. Second step of the plan, break down the problem into manageable pieces. Third, identify the root cause. Number 4, set a target for improvement. Again, we're still in the plan. The final step of the plan is to select the appropriate solution among several alternatives. Finally, in step 6, we get to doing something, which is trying out the idea. And then in step 7, we check the results of our experiment. And the problem solver does not leave his role until he keeps checking, further adjusting the process, going through cycles of PDCA until it has been demonstrably stabilized and has run without problems consistently for a period of time, usually months. In step 8, there are some additional adjustments made. We standardize and spread the results as appropriate. The countermeasures are standardized and may be shared with others who might find this useful for their own problem solving. Results are not to be blindly copied and stamped out like a cookie cutter, but rather considered when others are going through their own TBP process. Learning to manage vertically and horizontally the development of T-type leaders. Top leaders at Toyota must become T-type leaders. The concept is pretty simple. A T-type leader gains depth of understanding and experience in a particular technical area, the long stem of the T, then runs out to gain exposure across the organization, the top horizontal part of the T. This is sometimes referred to in Toyota as growing deep roots before the tree branches out. The depth within a specialty would test the patience of many young people who think they should be on a fast track to a management role. The leaders who advance the furthest in the company have gone beyond their specialty to take on horizontal roles and to manage across departments. Moving horizontally works so well at Toyota because of the emphasis on Toyota business practices as the core competency of leaders. As a leader moves up the ladder, the technical details become less important than the approach to thinking scientifically, working step by step to achieve very challenging goals. A massive commitment to developing leaders. Toyota's goal is to have a ratio of about 1 leader for every 4 to 6 people, with some variation depending on the level and department. The aim is to provide enough teachers and coaches to support each employee so that actual development of employees and leaders can take place. Toyota does not believe that flat structures actually save anything. In fact, it believes they are ultimately more costly than the more hierarchical coaching structure that Toyota uses. The large span of control that is typical of many Western organizations is in some ways more wasteful because in this environment, there are limited opportunities to guide people's development and coach potential leaders. Developing leaders the Toyota way. The key job of a Toyota leader teacher is to teach the student to take responsibility for her self-development, yet remain accountable for the results. Toyota needs capable, highly developed leaders and problem solvers at every level of the company. Therefore, people's development cannot be left to chance or happenstance, and it cannot be the responsibility of anyone other than the leader or manager who is closest to the gemba and directly responsible for the people who need developing. Toyota places so much value on the customers and the value-adding team members who serve the customers that it often seems that the hierarchy is turned upside down. The value-adding team members are at the top and are the most important, and the supporting leaders must prove their worth by demonstrating how they are helping the team members better perform their jobs. The concept of servant leadership has been incorporated into leadership development at the Toyota plant in Kentucky in the United States. The Toyota approach is not unique to Japanese culture. The core tenets and approaches are found in many cultures around the world. Clarifying expectations and accountability through visual management. Leaders and teachers must set clear expectations for those they lead and be able to clearly judge their progress toward both results and development of scientific thinking skills. At Toyota, they say that any problem is a gap between standard and actual. The standard can be the current expected high-level performance or a stretch objective to a new, even higher level of performance. Visual management is about making clear the current gap between the standard and the actual performance. A key reason for the dedication to visual management at Toyota is that it clarifies expectations, determines accountability for all the parties involved, and gives them the ability to track their progress and to measure their self-development. Every metric that matters throughout the company, especially on the shop floor, is presented visually for everyone involved in meeting the goal to see. For example, the A3 reports are often posted on visual display boards. They are standardized and designed to follow a pattern that can be easily understood and digested at a glance. It's hard to imagine a problem-solving exercise that does not involve creating diagrams and charts of a system or process to help people visualize the current condition and clarifying their thinking and make sure that nothing has been missed. The role of the leader mentors to ensure that visual management systems are focused on the right issues and can be easily understood. In conclusion, leaders who bring in lean consultants often make the mistake of assuming that they can buy someone to manage the lean effort. They do not see that they must themselves self-develop if they want to have any hope of succeeding. Many companies that pursue lean programs experience short-lived success in project areas, but that success often quickly dissipates. After that, the question comes, how can we sustain these lean gains? The answer to sustainment is to work harder at developing leaders. Sustainment is an ongoing process of continuous improvement. The most important lesson from Toyota is the high value it places on developing others. The company is patient and is willing to spend the time and money to do it right. It takes not years, but decades to develop senior executives through a process of deep training, coaching, and broad experience. Great quote by Akio Toyoda, president of Toyota Motor Company. The job of a leader is not to put them in positions to fail, but to put them in challenging positions where they must work hard to succeed and still see how they could have been even better. Chapter 4. Daily Kaizen, continually developing leadership from the bottom up. Many organizations only invest in developing executives who go to expensive leadership development programs and may even get a professional leadership coach. Toyota's leadership approach, despite its reliance on hierarchy, expects leadership from and grants authority to individuals at much lower levels of the hierarchy than is typical in Western companies. There are three benefits to this approach. First, the dispersal power and the expectation that leadership will come from the base of the hierarchy ensures that there is a constantly growing roster of potential future senior leaders who are gaining experience on a daily basis. Second, it ensures that change is driven by the people closest to the problem, which results in better problem solving, more sustainable solutions, and the possibility of continuous improvement throughout the organization. Third, It ensures that the true north that is being pursued is Toyota's goal, not the goals of an individual leader. A better understanding of Kaizen. Often Kaizen is viewed as many isolated small improvements, as in a suggestion system, but at Toyota it is much more than this. Senior managers are expected to lead Kaizen activities that have a broad impact across many functions, leading to major systems change. Their goals are big, but the approach is still PDCA, which means identify the gap between the current state and the desired future, understand the current condition, and then move toward shorter-term targets through a series of rapid experiments. Each one is an individual PDCA loop. The same pattern of problem solving is expected at every level, top, middle, and front line, though the goals become more focused on narrower parts of the organization as you work your way to the front line. Even executives leading major transformations break down the big problem into many small steps, and the next steps are discovered because there is learning from the earlier steps. We sometimes hear the phrase, doing a Kaizen, as if it were a one-off project using Lean or Six Sigma methods, or perhaps organizing a Kaizen event for a week to make a burst of changes. At Toyota, Kaizen is not a set of projects or special events. Rather, it's an integral part of daily leadership. It's how the company operates at the most fundamental level. It's what the majority of leaders of Toyota are doing when they're leading, supporting daily Kaizen. There are two types of Kaizen that require daily activity: maintenance Kaizen and improvement Kaizen. Maintenance Kaizen is the daily work of reacting to the inevitable mistakes, breakdowns, changes, or variations that occur in everyday life in order to meet the standard, which could be productivity or quality or safety. It is what is expected. The goal is to bring the system back to the standard, just as a thermostat signals the furnace to bring the temperature back to the standard setting. When the problem has been contained, work groups are expected to select the most frequent or serious problems and, through root cause analysis, prevent them from recurring. The second type of Kaizen is improvement Kaizen. This is the work of not just maintaining standards, but raising the bar. No matter how many improvements have been made, every process is still full of waste and ripe with opportunity to improve. Toyota inculcates the idea to all employees that the goal is perfection, and therefore every process can be improved. Continuous improvements made through Kaizen are critical to the evolutionary and sustainable implementation of lean concepts in manufacturing or anywhere else. At Toyota, it is not accepted to quote-unquote implement a lean tool for the sake of using the tool. For example, one does not implement Kanban to pull material. Rather, the starting point is always a specific problem, a gap between the desired and actual state. Daily Kaizen cannot happen without adding new energy to the system. This is the role of the leader in supporting daily Kaizen, making sure that new energy is added, not doing the work directly. Traditional American leadership models focus on an executive as a visionary or change agent who then drives change through an organization by force of will. Toyota leadership is much more about teamwork, relying on connected leadership at all levels who act as coaches for their direct reports. Perhaps what is most extraordinary is Toyota's investment in and trust of group leaders and team leaders at the front line. This investment is most clearly seen in the work group structure, without which daily Kaizen would be severely limited. In fact, it is fair to say that the basic unit of organization at Toyota is a small work group, with a group leader, who's often called the frontline supervisor in other organizations, and several team leaders supporting the group leader. The team leaders are production members who take on leadership roles. If the capability of the group leaders is weak, then even the most brilliant idea from the top of the organization is likely to be poorly implemented and weakly sustained. In many ways, Toyota views its group leaders as its most important leaders. They are members of the work group and thus have the greatest amount of direct influence over team members, and they are part of the management team that is most responsible for delivering business results to the company. Team leaders play both production roles and leadership roles. As an example, if there is one group leader for a part of the production line and 20 team members in that group, there will be 4 team leaders, so a ratio of 1 team leader for every 5 members. On a day when everyone has shown up to work, 2 of the team leaders work on production, and 2 will be offline, where their first priority is responding to and-on. That's team members playing a chord when something goes wrong. Team leaders then lead Kaizen to solve these problems. When leaders develop the ability to play a linking pin role effectively, then the organization is positioned to mature from a controlling authoritative system to a consultative management system and ultimately to the highest level of a true participative management system. The long-term challenge of developing true Kaizen capability requires a level of patience and a level of financial investment. The alternative is to give up on developing daily Kaizen, give up on sustaining improvement, and give up on establishing a true lean enterprise. Does the organization have senior leaders who are willing to let group leaders lead and are committed to doing what it takes to inject energy into daily Kaizen? If not, no tool in the world will create sustainable gains from lean approaches. If so, there is no shortage of useful tools and approaches and creative, innovative thinking. We have to make one point absolutely clear. It's not about the tools. Toyota's success is not the result of TPS, Toyota Business Practices, process diagnostics, or any other single tool. No matter what tool is used, the determining factor for success is leadership at every level, but particularly in the groups that do the value-added work. Speed of implementation is fine, but not at the cost of sacrificing learning development and commitment of the team members who need to maintain and to continue to improve the system. Finally, Peter Drucker said it well. No institution can possibly survive if it needs geniuses or supermen to manage it. It must be organized in such a way as to be able to get along under a leadership composed of average human beings. Chapter 5. Hoshin Kanri, Align Vision, Goals, and Plans for Continuous Improvement. In Chapter 4, we looked at the grassroots nature of Toyota leadership. A large part of Toyota's success can be attributed to group leaders' daily Kaizen leadership and the backing of more senior leadership from the bottom of the organizational pyramid. However, it does not take a leadership expert to point out the limitations of a solely bottom-up approach. In a system in which each group operates semi-autonomously, owning its own process, improvement activities do not necessarily complement one another. Every organization, Toyota included, needs to prioritize its initiatives and to adjudicate and resolve the differences between competing or conflicting efforts. Toyota's approach to the universal challenge of coordinated, directed action across the corporation is Hoshin Kanri, also known as policy deployment or strategy deployment. Literally translated, Hoshin means compass or pointing the direction, while Kanri means management or control. Hoshin Kanri is the process of setting goals and targets, and most importantly, the concrete plans for reaching those targets. Hoshin Kanri and Daily Kaizen are both part of the company's commitment to continuous improvement. Hoshin Kanri links the leadership together in a tight chain of goal setting and goal achievement. The movement down the organization can be thought of as a big triangle that relates broad goals at the top executive level to concrete actions taken and measured by the working teams. As goals move down through the company, they become more specific. Become best in class in quality at the top level can work its way down to very specific targets on very specific measures, such as a 5% improvement per year over 3 years in first-time defect-free welding. An outcome target should be accompanied by one or a series of process targets, such as implement a predictive tool change system to change 100% of tools on a planned schedule. This is something that can be easily measured day by day, work group by work group. Vertically, goals cascade down the organization and are turned into innovative thinking about how to achieve the goals, getting more specific as you approach the front line. Horizontally, different functions coordinate their plans to achieve the broader goals. However, this chain of tightly linked goals is only as strong as the weakest link in the leadership chain, which is why Toyota works so hard at leadership development. The Hoshin Kanri process. True Hoshin Kanri is a process of innovation and of developing people at all levels, and it takes time and commitment. Just like the cyclical leadership development model, Hoshin Kanri operates at many levels and in many cycles. At Toyota, they have a long-term global vision, often 10 years out, and a rolling 5-year business plan. The 5-year plan is then broken into annual Hoshin Kanri plans that ultimately support the long-term vision. These annual plans are cascaded down through the various levels of the organization. Throughout the year, progress is reviewed against the targets and adjustments are made through many reflection events. Thus, as with much else at Toyota, the Hoshin Kanri process can be thought of in terms of Dr. W. Edwards Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act, PDCA, problem-solving process. Throughout the company, there are many smaller PDCA cycles throughout the year. Every attempt to improve a process, guided by the Hoshin goals, is a PDCA process. Toyota's starting assumption in Hoshin is that the future is unknowable, and there will be many surprises as they work toward their goals. Therefore, the Hoshin plan remains at a high level, and the details get worked out as leaders at all levels work to overcome obstacles to achieve their targets. Toyota considers the two key skills for Hoshin Kanri to be problem solving and on-the-job development, or OJD. Each level of leader is expected to coach their next level leaders through OJD, which means at the work site working through real problems. As we'll discuss later, Mike Rother introduced the idea of the improvement kata to practice the skills of problem solving and the coaching kata to learn how to effectively coach and develop people on the job. Long-term vision set by internal board of directors. The plan stage begins with the long-term vision and goals for the company. It is the board of directors who established Toyota's top-level Hoshin, not just the CEO and a handful of his close associates. This is after a lot of input from the managing officers and the different regions of Toyota. Toyota is one of the holdout companies in Japan that still relies on an internal board of directors made up of the company's senior executives with no external board. In more recent years, Toyota has added several outside members to the board to get more diverse perspectives. At Toyota, having a purely external board would mean that key decisions were being made by people who are not socialized into the Toyota way or deeply trained in the rigorous, highly disciplined Toyota business practices process. The deep involvement of the board in personally investigating the state of the company and its various operations is another reason why Toyota's process is unique. As an example, the 2010 global vision set by Toyota in 2002 was to become the most respected and admired firm in the automotive business while following the guiding principles of the company. From long-term vision to intermediate plans. The core of Global Vision 2010, becoming the most respected and admired company in the automobile industry, is a fairly vague goal. The next phase of Hoshin Kanri is turning that vague goal into more concrete terms, and from there, creating a mid-range plan covering 4 to 5 years that is clearly actionable. A 15 market share target was announced by Fujio Cho as a way of making the goal of becoming the most respected and admired company into something tangible that everyone in the company could grasp. It was not the metric that the board was focused on. Rather, achieving a 15 market share would be an indicator that Toyota was succeeding at the important tasks necessary to become the most respected and admired automotive company. Toward the end of each year, the president of Toyota Motor Corporation makes a speech in which he reviews the prior year, summarizes the business environment and trends, and paints a picture of the future and what the challenges facing the company are for the year to come. By then, the company has already been very busy with Hoshin planning, starting with a deep review of the prior year in about August. By the beginning of January, the Hoshin Kanri plans are in place around the world. Catchball to agree on actual targets at every level. The catchball process, that is intensive two-way discussions, is a dynamic planning process as the high-level goals are cascaded down through the organization and turned into more specific, actionable plans. The catchball process has an important role, not only in refining the corporate and regional Hoshin, but also as a check on the whole Hoshin concept. The catchball process provides feedback through the ranks about whether annual and medium-term goals are achievable and whether priorities need to be reshuffled or resources reallocated to meet the specific goals. The success of the process depends equally on the senior leaders having deep knowledge of her domain so that the goal for the plant is actually achievable, and on the junior leader's willingness to take on a challenge and pursue improvement in the right way. The key point about this dialogue is that the focus is not only on outcomes, but on a detailed understanding of the current state to help identify focus areas. Proposal A3s are heavily used for this planning as a tool for the leader at one level to coach the next level leader, thereby further developing their skills for improvement. It is too easy for other companies to take away the wrong lessons from Toyota, for example, by focusing on tools rather than on culture, or on metrics rather than on leadership. It's also easy to simply reject the Toyota approach on the grounds that it would never work here. It is no doubt true that Toyota culture is distinct from and even foreign to the standards and practices that have become the norm in many global companies. Unfortunately, taking the long view, patiently developing people, and particularly leaders, and treating employees as appreciating assets is not always within the power of even the most senior executives of a company, who must answer to shareholders and the board of directors. However, we have seen lots of real-world examples of companies that have learned from Toyota and succeeded. In this chapter, we give you a front-row seat for a very American company trying to emerge from a crisis which was turned around under the leadership of former Toyota Managing Officer Gary Convis. After retiring from Toyota, and as we were writing this book, he was invited to become the CEO of Dana Corporation for 1 year to help in the turnaround. He was then asked to stay on as vice chairman for a year, and then later as a sensei on retainer to advise the firm's new senior leaders. We believe that other companies can learn from Toyota leadership because Dana did so, in the worst possible scenario, emerging from bankruptcy just as the Great Recession was starting. Introducing Toyota leadership will always take years of investment, and even after 3.5 years after the process began, the team at Dana believed it had just gotten started. We will describe Dana Corporation's journey in a simplified A3, starting from the background and current condition, going through the goal and the key causes of the problems they had, and ending with the solutions developed and their execution. Dana Holding Corporation is a global supplier of components for the personal and commercial truck market. They had a long and proud heritage dating back to 1904. However, early in 2006, the company faced insolvency due to industry changes, competition, and bad acquisitions. In March 2006, Dana filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and then was able to emerge from Chapter 11 in February 2008. To support Dana in his current challenges, Gary was invited to join the Dana board by John Devine, the acting CEO and chairman of the board. Then later, John Devine asked Gary to act as CEO for a year. There were some positives. Dana's history spanned more than a century, and they had the technology, customers, and a very positive reputation for quality and great technology. And that would allow them to ultimately be successful. The company also boasted of some exceptional leaders who embraced learning and change in a new culture, including John Devine, whose storied career included chief financial officer at both Ford and GM. On the other hand, the auto industry faced a series of unprecedented challenges in the 1990s and 2000s, such as soaring steel and fuel prices, declining truck sales, and the devastating impact of the Great Recession on all segments of Dana's core markets. In this turbulent and very uncertain environment, some Dana leaders failed to adapt their mindset and strategy and embrace the opportunity for self-development. They missed the chance to foster a culture of respect for people and continuous improvement, which are essential for long-term success. Together, Gary and John set 3 priorities for Dana. Of course, the first was survival. Second, build a new culture of accountability. And third, build a foundation for future excellence. Obviously, these were not linear steps. Action had to be taken on all 3 fronts simultaneously. Gary and John had to balance 3 goals at once: downsizing and restructuring to survive the short term, and developing leadership and operational excellence for the long term. When Gary had joined the board of directors, it quickly became apparent the company, as it existed, could not survive. There were 4 main problems he had addressed immediately when becoming CEO. 1. Chimney organization. Dana's 7 divisions operated in silos, which undermined its operational efficiency and performance. There's no knowledge sharing, no flexible capacity allocation, and no alignment of goals across the organization. Number 2, redundant functions. The company's divisions operated independently with separate resources, staff, and facilities. This resulted in high costs and low knowledge sharing across the organization. Number 3, excess capacity, particularly too many small plants. Dana's global network of 113 plants in 26 countries faced a major challenge. Low demand and high fixed costs made many plants unprofitable and underutilized. With these small plants, Dana could not easily shift production to other product lines or locations. 4th, there was no standard operating philosophy or standard key performance indicators. The company lacked a clear vision and a performance monitoring system. Plant managers did not know how well the departments were doing because they only saw the total results and not the underlying processes. And Gary, as CEO, wanted to have visibility at the plant level, department level, even down to the processes. Dana's corporate culture was the root cause of many challenges that the company had to overcome to stay afloat, survive, and ultimately to flourish. First, let's look at the approach to priority 1, basic survival. The financial crisis forced Dana to slash costs and staff as fast as revenues dropped, without time for careful analysis of people, plants, and products, mostly led by John Devine. It certainly was not the ideal environment for thinking long-term and investing in a culture of respect for people and continuous improvement. As would any leader who had been well-trained at Toyota, Gary focused right away on getting a first-hand view of Dana by going and seeing. Gary brought in some ace TPS experts from Toyota or its affiliates, who then led radical Kaizen to cut costs quickly and efficiently, removing waste and enhancing operational excellence, and of course, meeting quality and safety standards. Toyota trained, they of course worked through the plant managers and would lead and coach developing the plant managers rather than doing everything by themselves. The plant managers were put in a challenging situation that was entirely new to most of them. Gary started with zero-based budgeting. They had to start from scratch and justify the necessity of each cost. The second priority was to build a new culture of accountability. The ultimate source of many of the problems that Dana had to solve, if it were to survive, was the corporate culture. This was the second priority for Gary and John, building a new culture at Dana by ensuring that the right leaders and the right metrics were in place. The right leaders were ones who could self-develop and develop others, who could learn to lead daily Kaizen and major change, and who could keep their teams pointed at true north. It did mean rapidly identifying those leaders at Dana who were willing and able to learn and lead to change a culture. This would require not only self-development, but rapid development of Dana team members, and quickly replacing those who are not capable, offering them positions sometimes at a lower level. Gary established and staffed an internal training consulting group to teach PS, as well as a process engineering group to help redesign technical processes as part of building a foundation for operational excellence and Toyota-style leadership. A standard set of metrics were needed for quick cost reduction while improving quality and on-time delivery. And as I mentioned, Gary wanted visibility at every level of the company. To do this, he put together a team that came up with a set of metrics that emphasized operational excellence. These key performance indicators clearly showed what mattered to the new Dana Corporation. Plant conversion costs, controllable in the four walls, quality and safety were chief among them. More important than the specific new metrics were new ways of reporting on and using the metrics. Gary and the operational excellence team set out to put a standard visual management system in place in every plant with daily reporting and weekly reviews by Gary and his team. It might seem odd, but one of the keys of developing accountability was a shift to a matrix organization. Matrix organizations are often considered cumbersome and communication is difficult, which might in fact get in the way of restructuring. A key factor in making the matrix structure work, however, was combining and greatly simplifying the siloed business units that had been in place. Priority 3 was to build a foundation for operational excellence and Toyota-style leadership for the long term. In tandem with the downsizing and cost-cutting, setting new metrics, and finding new leaders, Gary was taking some immediate actions to build the foundation for operational excellence. Gary decided to focus on a subset of the Toyota production system and problem-solving tools to drive quick wins and the results data needed. He focused on standardized work balance charts, balancing to tact, and even basic cleanup and organization of the workplace, that is 5S. He used the single-page A3-size report as the main tool for communicating the current status of processes and the problem-solving efforts that were used to make improvements. Many Kaizen workshops were kicked off with instructions to continue until all goals were achieved, with sustainable new processes. The senior executive team established 3 or 4 fundamental improvement targets and rolled them out worldwide. The chief one focused on a target for reducing conversion costs. Another main one was to reduce inventory. And reducing inventory freed up cash to help pay down the debt. An underappreciated yet critical part of operational excellence is trust. Part of trust building was making sure that Kaizen did not get confused with headcount reduction. Kaizen workshops focused on waste elimination, not headcount reduction, though different efforts for downsizing were in fact reducing the number of employees. If the financial situation dictated further layoffs, that process would be handled entirely separately from the Kaizen projects. Gary had to simultaneously develop and deploy a formal plan for continuous improvement at more than 90 plants around the world, and at the same time support the transformation of operations. The Dana operating system was developed with the intent of delivering and sustaining breakthrough results. The Dana operating system was represented as a house very similar to the Toyota Production System house. As in TPS, there were twin pillars, the first just in time, which had the true north vision of building exactly what the customer wants in the amount they want when the customer wanted it. This pillar was supported by tools such as standard work, one-piece flow cells, eliminating changeovers between products, and having equipment that functioned flawlessly. The second pillar was Jidoka, or building in quality without errors. Jidoka requires stopping and immediately fixing every problem as it is found, as facilitated by tools like the end-on system, visual management, and mistake-proofing devices. A Dana operating system roadmap was designed as a 5-year plan. At a high level, it was a series of 7 steps that looked quite mechanistic. The first, discussed in detail previously, was to focus on radical improvement through developing KPIs that clearly display the difference between target and actual, then using structured problem solving to close the gaps. The second step was to find the Dana operating system in greater detail, deploy more formal training, and deploy local subject matter experts in all of the DOS tools globally for each plant. The 7 steps were not just high-level generalizations. Each step had a set of extremely detailed actions and plans. There were several important aspects built in to ensure the proper balance between deploying tools, getting results, and developing people. First, the focus was as much on leadership development as it was on driving change and getting results. The plant managers were rigorously coached by regional continuous improvement experts and responsible for deployment and results. Second, the roadmap that they created was a set of guidelines for the plant managers who were at the Gemba and had a better understanding of what was needed in their particular context. Different plants applied different tools in different sequences, although all needed the foundation of the first phase. Third, in the first 3 years, there was a very conscious effort to keep everything, especially the tools, very simple. Fourth, every plant was required to have a model line, an area where they had raised TPS to a particularly high level, so that there was an opportunity to experiment, learn the tools and supporting approaches before they were expanded across the plant. Fifth, the local experts had to be in place in each plant so that they could provide the rapid response and immediate coaching needed to keep the momentum going. Conclusion. What happened as a result? The results of the Dana operating system efforts speak for themselves. All KPIs improved significantly, costs were reduced, inventory was greatly reduced, and profits increased. The stock price actually skyrocketed. At the low point in March 2009, Dana stock traded for just 19 cents. Over the course of Gary's first year, the stock price skyrocketed by 68 times to a little over $13 per share, the largest improvement in stock value of any automotive supplier in the world. The overall cost reductions, productivity improvements, quality improvements, and inventory reductions were stunning. As of September 2011, it was becoming clearer that Dana was over the hump and was on the road toward a healthy long-term future. Dana was able to shift from short-term survival mode to a more aggressive growth strategy, particularly in emerging markets like China and India. There's no magic in the Toyota bag of tricks that can bring a company that is on its deathbed back to life without any pain. The key difference at Dana was the investment in hiring and developing leaders, an investment of both time and extremely scarce capital, even during the darkest days when survival was very much in question. While the short-term metrics had to be hit, Gary and the team made sure that the softer goals of leadership development were also being achieved, setting the company up for the longer term. The Dana story illustrates the power of TPS even for a company in crisis. In the final chapter, we'll reflect on lean leadership and the challenges for organizations that wish to truly make the journey toward a culture of continuous improvement. Let me end with a quote I love. Rough waters are truer tests of leadership. In calm water, every ship has a good captain. A Swedish proverb. The lean leadership development model starts with leaders developing themselves so that they can develop others and support continuous improvement at all levels, and ultimately build a learning organization with aligned goals and plans. All of this is in the service of a vision of contributing to customers and society through coaching rather than issuing orders. This model is inspired by Toyota's success in creating a culture of empowered problem solvers. To do this, leaders outside Toyota who may have lived in command and control organizations need new skills to learn to ask questions, coach others to find root causes, and respect people. By doing so, they can foster a technical and social system that delivers value to customers and employees. Lean leadership is not about settling for mediocrity or compromising on quality. It is about pursuing perfection even if it seems impossible. It is about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement where everyone has the opportunity to master their craft and contribute to the common goal. The premise of the book is that Toyota has managed a new and powerful paradigm for developing leadership. Toyota's philosophy and approach is fundamentally different from classical management, which emphasizes leaders as planners, controllers, decision makers, and order givers. We sort the differences that we have observed into two categories. One, those related to how leaders make business decisions and solve problems. And two, those related to leadership style and personal motives. Let's first consider business decision-making and problem-solving. A good process will produce good results repeatedly. A leader who relies on luck or temporary measures to get good results is forcing a bad process. Toyota learns from real problems, not classroom exercises. Toyota's concept of a good process is one that expects and reveals problems without blame. Most Western managers think a good process is error-free, where Toyota believes every process always has waste that can be eliminated. Traditional Western leaders assume employees are selfish and incompetent. Therefore, they use metrics and incentives as carrots and sticks to manipulate their employees. It has been proven by decades of research that this type of leadership kills intrinsic motivation and enthusiasm about work. On the other hand, Toyota leaders assume employees are capable and motivated by a clear vision that is about more than making money, and a degree of autonomy where they can participate in goal setting and take responsibility for using their problem-solving skills to achieve challenging objectives. The real difference is not in the metrics. It is in the dedicated, short, speedy, and repetitive execution cycles of plan, do, check, act, PDCA, for which leaders provide both accountability and support. Toyota's leadership formula is consistent and evolving based on living the Toyota way and learning from various methods and concepts. It starts with careful selection of new hires, who are then grown from within and selected for more challenging opportunities based on demonstrated leadership and how they learn from challenges. Toyota values highly competent leaders who repeatedly demonstrate their capability by showing it on the job. First, Toyota needs excellent leaders who are highly competent at understanding the work, so it puts remarkable amounts of time and resources into developing such leaders. Second, leaders must go beyond surface-level understanding to deep mastery of lean thinking. To lead effectively in the Toyota way, senior executives need to visit the Gemba, where the work is done, and coach the employees there. Coaching involves deep understanding, patient dialogue, and direct feedback, which are seen as caring and supportive. Third, Toyota leaders need a passion for true north. True north gives the aspiring leader the faith to go right into the unknown of a new challenge without a ready-made answer. It takes years of training, coaching by sensei, and experience to have a deep understanding of Toyota's vision of perfection. Perfection is never reached, and it is not, in fact, the destination, but what counts is the journey in the direction of perfection. We described Hoshin Kanri as the final stage of linking together the capable leaders developed at all levels to deal with the ever-shifting business objectives for the company in response to an ever-changing environment. Hoshin Kanri is often compared to the roundly criticized management practice of management by objectives, that is, MBO. MBO, in the ideal, is a management approach that empowers people by involving them in setting clear goals and allowing them to figure out how to achieve them. However, in a classical management environment where planning and decision-making is a top-down process, MBO devolves into setting objectives, mostly financial, and getting managers at all levels to be accountable for meeting these objectives. Meeting these objectives means figuring it out with little support. In this common practice, MBO can also lead to negative consequences, such as cutting corners to make the numbers and finding quick fixes rather than digging to root cause and overcoming obstacles one by one. As a counterbalance to this unbalanced focus on results only, but still in the context of classical management, some companies have shifted to a more recent trend called management by means, that is MBM. MBM is built on the theory that if managers pursue their jobs in the right way, positive outcomes will necessarily follow. Although MBM seeks to redress the imbalance caused by focusing only on results, it goes too far to the other extreme. If you don't have targets for results, there's no way to know whether you're pursuing those targets in the right way. It's not about means versus objectives, but about both. True lean management recognizes that the target setting process and the pursuit of targets cannot be independent. If you don't set targets in the right way, and if people do not have the skills or motivation to develop a good plan, it's irrelevant whether your management approach is by means or by objectives. We argued in Chapter 2 that every Toyota team member goes through a basic set of development steps at each stage of her development. Following the process of basic learning by copying exactly, Shu, mastering the basics so that they become second nature, Ha, and becoming so masterful at the basics that she can go beyond these and improvise, Ri. You don't get to the Ri stage as a leader until you can consistently use the right means and achieve the results that you signed up for. It's easy to talk about treating employees as your most valuable asset and about leadership styles that value consensus, teamwork, and patient investment in developing new leaders when a company is making money hand over fist. Toyota's record of meeting its goals and constantly raising the bar is certainly impressive, given the human temptation to complacency. Every leader throughout the company has to be ready to respond rapidly to major changes and participate in mobilizing the organization to adapt to a changing environment. Responding rapidly to major change means more self-development, not less. Demanding more development of others, not just employee sacrifice. Providing more support for daily Kaizen, not canceling Kaizen activities. And driving Hoshin Kanri faster and further to look to the future, not only focus on the current crisis. For example, in the Great Recession, when Toyota's Indiana plant had to shut down one of its assembly lines for 3 months due to low demand, no regular team members were laid off. Instead, they used the time to learn new skills and improve the production process. Mike Rother observed many Toyota master teachers at work and concluded that they share an underlying pattern for how they work toward goals and how they coach others. He observed that their approach goes beyond what we think of as problem-solving to fix things, to scientific thinking as a fundamental meta skill to reach ever greater challenges. At a high level, the pattern is to set a big challenge, understand the current condition, set your first short-term focus area one at a time. He called these target conditions. And then do rapid PDCA, experimenting your way to the goal. The method of teaching Toyota calls on-the-job development, that is OJD, happens at the Gemba through issuing a challenge and then coaching by questioning without giving answers to content questions. Toyota Kata was modeled after this Toyota approach to developing people, using ideas from martial arts. Kata and karate are used in the shu stage to practice small skills exactly as the coach directs. The student then has more freedom in the ha and ri stage to innovate, and these skills become habitual so the student can focus on the fight. Mike rather used the pattern he observed at Toyota and developed kata to be used to learn and teach scientific thinking, working on real problems at the Gemba. The result goes beyond general lists of what makes good coaching to a practical approach for learning how to be a lean leader, that is, a coaching leader. We've emphasized in the Toyota Way to Lean Leadership Toyota's ability to build a strong culture and overcome its challenges, and that is why its leadership model is worth learning from. You can then turn our Diamond Model of leadership development around and treat it as 6 diagnostic questions for your organization. Question 1. Is there a shared vision of true north in your organization? We believe that in most companies the answer is no. The vision needs to be believable, actionable, and reinforced in concrete terms as the work is done. When the organization does not have the leadership maturity to handle bold 10-year visions, a midterm vision based on operating principles with clear targets for key performance indicators may be a good starting point. Question 2. Do we have leaders in place who are willing to take on challenges with a positive mindset and develop themselves? The ultimate goal is self-development for all leaders at every level. A targeted approach is needed, such as mentoring senior leaders, taking leaders to suppliers or to your Gemba, and possibly creating a model line or model site. The key point is to start somewhere and then keep learning and spreading. Question 3. Are leaders at all levels embracing their roles as teachers, developing others to lead the way in the future? Self-development is hard, but transforming leaders into teachers may be even harder. Leaders should develop others, not simply give orders, and to do this they need maturity and discipline. The starting point is to make clear the expectation that leaders will develop others and to make that part of their ongoing performance assessment and feedback. Question 4. Are leaders at all levels using a rigorous process to solve the right problems step by step? There are many problem-solving models, 6 steps, 8 steps, which, if followed consistently, will help us develop a scientific thinking mindset. Rother's Toyota Kata is a powerful way of developing people to plan and execute scientifically, which is the best way we know to work through uncertain terrain toward big goals. Question 5. Does the company have an environment in which aligned targets for improvement are developed and good ideas for achieving those targets are shared across the organization? We emphasize that the nature of Hoshin Kanri will evolve as the organization evolves. At first, the emphasis often needs to be how we can set the right goals at the top and then measure and reward the achievement of those goals. The most important point about Hoshin Kanri is to go beyond debating outcome targets and spend time coaching to get sound plans for achieving goals at each level in the organization. As leaders develop and follow good problem-solving processes, achieving the business objectives will come more naturally. Question 6. Do we use major challenges from the environment to further strengthen our leadership and our company to work toward a long-term vision? Most companies waste a good crisis by panicking and weakening their organizations. A crisis reinforces existing tendencies, making it hard to build a culture of excellence in the midst of the crisis. On the other hand, Toyota uses the crisis as a chance to develop its people and company further, as exemplified by the brilliance of Akio Toyoda in leading through crisis after crisis. Other companies can start building the capability to face the next economic tsunami. What if your CEO is a classical management thinker and believes that the key to motivating employees is to cultivate a culture of survival of the fittest, not mutual development? This is, in fact, the situation in many large organizations. Our answer is you can still get started. We mean that. We've seen many directors and managers become passionate about the Toyota way and apply its values within their purview. Remember that good problem solving always recognizes the current constraints, and that there are many, many countermeasures that are possible within your purview, whatever your situation. So please try, then reflect, then try some more. Learn about and practice Toyota Kata. If you have an opportunity to engage a sensei, seize it. There's always more to learn, and success generally leads to positive attention and interest from the top and sets you up to start to persuade other leaders. Toyota leadership as a model is not a program with a defined starting point and finish line. Self-development and developing others is a lifelong journey. So, are you up for the challenge?